When we look at risk-based supervision, this is an approach, is a structured approach that needs to be followed, where it focuses where we need to identify the risks that the entities that are regulated are faced with, and we need to assess their financial conditions, assess their operational environment, to see if they're able to mitigate the risks that they are facing. And from our end as the supervisors or the regulatory authority, it also allows us to direct our resources to where it is really needed. And therefore it shapes our supervisory objective, that we are able to put resources where it matters, where it has great impact. And this risk-based supervision as well improves our supervisory outcomes, which is the safety and soundness of the financial system. And also, as I have said, it helps us to efficiently allocate the resources, being the financial resources and human resources, optimally, so that we are able to execute on our mandate perfectly well. Just to give you a bit of some understanding of between what we call compliance or rule-based supervision and risk-based supervision approach, which I was trying to contextualize in my introduction. When you look at rules-based or compliance-based, here the regulator focuses on ensuring that the entities comply with the rules. So we need to tick boxes that here you have complied. But when you look at risk-based supervision, here we focus on understanding the sector's unique features. So we need to understand your business other than just ticking the boxes. It is important that rules are observed, but we need to go beyond that to understand your business and the uniqueness of your business. In this respect, talking about yourself as retirement funds. And when you look at the rule-based, you'll see that the reporting requirements are much rigid. So you just need to do things within the parameters of the requirements. But when you look at risk-based supervision, here you need to identify and properly manage prudential and conduct risks that are posed by the entities. So we're focusing more on the risks, whether are prudential ones, emanating from prudential or emanating from conduct, and see how these are managed. And with compliance-based, all entities enjoy strict supervisory attention. So which means what I do to a systemically important institution, I must do the same to a smaller entity that does not have that impact even if something goes wrong with it. But when you look at risk-based supervision, as a regulator, I can make targeted interventions where the resources are directed to where the risk is, and we look at that risk and address same. Compliance-based is more of backwards looking. So we see what have you done, and this is how you have done it, and you do not observe the laws. But with risk-based supervision, we need to look at the future and say, these risks that are emerging, how can this be mitigated? How can this be managed? Rule-based, but when you look at risk-based, it's flexible and it's based on principles. And it is responsive. And we can respond to the urgent needs of the industry. To continue a little bit more on some of the differences between compliance or rule-based, you'll see that rule-based is more performance-based. Like I said, what have you done? But on risk-based, we look at the outcomes. And another important aspect when you look at the rules-based is that there's a lot of duplication of functions and work. So, for example, if the auditors, your external auditors have done some work, I'm not required to rely on their work. I have to satisfy myself that I need to do the same work, which means there will be duplication of functions and tasks. But when you look at risk-based supervision, here the regulator can rely on the work done by others, work done by the auditors, work done by the evaluators, the actuaries. We do not need to duplicate, as long as we can place reliance on the work that they have done. And with risk-based, we penalize institutions for breaches of the rules. That's what we do. But with risk-based, we want to address the emerging problems so that those problems are somehow mitigated, that their impact is lessened. Also, when you look at rule-based, that entities focus on compliance with rules, not risk management. So they will look at what does the rule say. Even if the rule has become absolute, that rule you may need to observe it. That's how rule-based is. I have just to make a little bit of a joke of how the industry has portrayed the registrar at some point, and they put up a picture saying NAMFISA staff also have gained weight because they have taken away gym rebate. And surely the industry were entitled to say so, but what the rule was saying was different. When the registrar implemented the rules, we could see that the rules somehow was maybe needed some adjustment. That's the problem or the difficulties of rule-based as compared to principle-based. So here what we do in risk-based supervision, entities are incentivized to improve risk management, and that's important for the regulator. So that is, in a nutshell, the comparison of the risk-based supervision. Just to give you some insights, when we talk about risk-based supervision, with respect to the authority, we have adopted 10 principles. When we go on this journey of risk-based, one, we need to have that supervisory framework, and that supervisory framework methodology is risk and principle-based. So we look at the risks, and it should be based on principles. And it's forward-looking, we're looking at outcomes, so that we can do some timely interventions. That's the first principle that we have adopted. And the second principle is that the board of directors, in your case, I should say the trustees, as well as senior management accountability, that is those who are charged with the governance of the entities, the trustees, the board of directors have that fiducial responsibility and the soundness of the financial institution, and to make sure that the conduct, how they conduct the business, as well as legislative requirements are met. So the responsibility is placed on those who are charged with governance. with being the board of directors and senior management. So they are accountable to that. The third principle is the risk tolerance, where we need to set our risk appetites in terms of how we identify risk and address material risks and the breaches thereof. And the other one is consolidated supervision. Here we understand that some entities are part of conglomerates, and therefore we need to make sure that we do not have regulatory burden on them. Therefore, we supervise conglomerates on consolidated basis in conjunction with other supervisors. For an example, if a pension fund and say an entity, a group of entities has a pension fund, has asset management, has a bank in it, has an insurance in it. Therefore, NAMFISA, the central bank, can go into that entity and look at what is happening in that entity at the same time, so that we can have synergies between the regulators. So that is one of the principles. And the fifth principle is sound predictive judgment, where we are able to identify and assess the fundamentals of ensuring effectiveness in terms of our judgments. And, I should also press here, the sixth principle that we need to look at, which we have adopted from the authority side, is the use of governance and oversight functions. So, where appropriate, like I said before, we can rely on the work that has been done by others, and we can rely on what the Board of Trustees has done, so that we minimize the duplication of efforts. But if what they have done is not satisfactory to us, then is when we can go deeper into assessing what we need to assess. Reliance on and use of work done by external stakeholders, this I have said before, I don't need to explain more. Timely risk focused reporting. So the reports that will be issuing are risk focused, and we must make sure that we communicate with the relevant institution timely, so that remedial action can take place. And I see that using cell phones now, I do not know how to spell. Instead of spelling continuous and dynamic, I spelled continuous and Namibia dollar dynamics. So please bear with me, it's a cell phone error, but the way it is end. So that is continuous and dynamic, where we continuously ensure that we monitor and identify the changes in the risks that may arise because of the way the industry is operating, their environment, and their risk profiles, so that we can adjust our supervisory priorities and intervene timely. And the final one is allocation of resources, where we'll be allocating our resources being guided by this risk-based supervision approach. Just some some of this weight I did of my, this is the practical issues. Maybe I change it. Some of the practical issues when you look at risk-based supervision, you look at it in three pillars: macro factors, the industry analysis that we will apply to that given institution. So that's in practical way on how we deal with risk-based methodology, where we ask pertinent questions, and then when these questions are answered, the outcome thereof determines our intervention. And what are the challenges of risk-based supervision? Why sometimes risk-based supervision is become ineffective? One, the methodology might be inappropriate, so the design of that methodology, somehow if it's not appropriate, you might not get the intended results. Secondly, is that inefficient understanding of the methodology. If the leadership does not understand the methodology and lack the appreciation of what are the elements that impacts the risk-based supervision, and if, in a nutshell, this is the buy-in of the leadership of the authority, they do not buy into the methodology. Therefore, the implementation thereof becomes a challenge. And the level of commitment and reinforcement by leadership. So it's important, like someone said, the fish rots from the head. I come from where there is enough fish, the river fish, not the sea fish. So it's true that if you want to know whether the fish is rotten or not, you look at the head. And you look at the eyes, then you will know. So anybody who says that statement is correct. So the leadership is important here, that there's commitment and buy-in and continuously reinforcing the methodology. Ineffective planning for implementation and the assessment of milestones. So you need to continuously assess and see if all the milestones are achieved. Another important thing, whenever you have new things that are happening, change management process is important. So if there is lack of change management process, then you will not succeed. Therefore, you need to have a program on letting everybody move along to understand and to embrace the change. And the other challenge is organizational resistance to change. So there might be some resistance and say, but why are we fixing it now? I think we were okay. This can emanate from different angles. It can be skills or any other thing, and people feel that this is uncomfortable territory. So they are moving away from the comfort zone. Then there is that resistance. And therefore, that's why important there is change management initiative that needs to accompany this change towards risk-based supervision. Inability to attract required resources and skills. As you have seen, risk-based supervision is different from rule-based, and therefore it requires different sets of skills. And we need to attract the skills that is required. If we can't attract it, maybe we need to grow that skill that we can reskill our people in order to implement risk-based supervision. And that's what we have been busy with. The structure is also important, and accountability. That the structure should be appropriate. If it's not appropriate, implementation thereof becomes difficult. Sometimes there's lack of capacity building of staff. If there is no capacity building where you reskill your people, then you are able to not to succeed in this. The inappropriate use of the tool that we have, like the tool that I have shown you, that we're going to use, if we do not use it appropriately, then we get wrong results and we base our decisions on wrong outcomes. And therefore, it's important that the tool is used properly. And on NAMFISA side, as the authority, we recognize that it's important that we focus on entities that pose the highest risks. That is crucial for us, because that will impact the financial system. That's why we are so enthusiastic in adopting risk-based supervision approach. And what this will do for us, we will have a consistent way of thinking and going about dealing with risks across the supervised industry. And our resources will be utilized optimally to only areas that pose a great risk. And I believe this will also heighten our engagement with the industry so that we can understand these entities. And also this gives us an idea of having a systematic and structured fashion of how we deal with our mandate. And actions that we take are based on mitigating the risks, and we'll be able to better manage the data, the information that we have to ascertain the risk profiles of the entities. And all what I have said here, this will permeate the entire organization, and even when we deal with some of our functions like enforcement, this will be done by using risk-based supervision, where even the penalties, administrative penalties that will be issued, will be more focused on the risk per se. So, colleagues, friends, and industry players, that is my story, and thank you very much. I conclude my, I thought it was a brief presentation. I conclude